A primary thing that I wind up doing when I talk with individuals who engage on a regular basis with people who are deep into the narcissistic pattern is I try to get them anchored in reality. Many times we use what I refer to as mythical thinking, hoping something to be true when in fact it's actually contrary to reality. And we just have these ideals about how things might be and could be, and we're just not willing to accept what's right there in front of us. And so part of learning how to have your emotional composure and well-being when you're engaging with that person is to come to terms with what I refer to as ugly truth. There's just some things about the whole narcissistic pattern that is just not a very pleasant thing. Now, what I've done is I've jotted down 10 of what I refer to as ugly truths that we have to come to terms with. And as we do this, I think I'm hoping it'll give you a much fuller idea of what that entire narcissistic pattern is all about. For example, ugly truth number one. When a narcissist says that they love you, they don't really mean they love you. What they mean is they love your admiration. Or if they say they like you, we'll say that as a corollary, maybe in a business situation. Again, it's the same thing. They like for you to admire them. Now, you know and I know that when we have a love relationship with someone, or if we have a liking relationship with someone, we appreciate who they are and what they bring to the equation. We like knowing about them. And even as we find some of their faults or flaws or mistakes, we think to ourselves, well, this is a way for me to just show that I have a loyalty that goes beyond just everything being conditional and having to fit into place. The narcissist isn't thinking that way. When they're looking at you thinking, do I love you or do I like you? What they're really thinking is, how can I get you to fill my narcissistic supply? They need to be important, and they need to feel like folks out there have their back and that people out there really hold them in high esteem. So their approach towards love or connection is much different. It's all about making themselves look better and feel better. And so as you engage with people like this, you'll have to just accept that as an ugly truth, because you may go into that relationship thinking, well, I want to connect with you by just knowing you more fully. And I want to be an affirming presence in your life. That's just how I think. But the narcissist doesn't think that way. Love and like is not a matter of truly admiring you. It's like you make them feel better, and that's the only thing that really matters. Well, actually, there's a second ugly truth that's a close corollary to that, and that is when narcissists, as they get to know you, are asking you personal questions, they're not doing so for the sake of understanding you more fully. They're actually trying to gather data against you. And they're trying to figure out, who you are and what your pluses and minuses are. And then at the appropriate time, then they can come back and use it in their favor and in your disfavor. As an example, let's suppose that you're getting to know somebody who it turns out they have a strong narcissistic bent. And so they ask you about your background and who you've been with and what kind of work you've done or activities you've had. And you can tell them all sorts of things about who you are and your history and all. And then they may start going in and ask more personal questions, which is normal. Normal people do that too. And let's suppose they say, well, when that happened that didn't seem to work out real well, what was really going on there? And you, in your honesty, may say, well, I don't really feel like I handled it well, or I wish that I could have done things differently. And they can seem interested at the time, only for you to find out later on that they were kind of gathering or holding together bullets to shoot against you. Oh, you remember when you told me about this situation? Yeah, I figured out pretty quickly that you're defective, or you do things wrong, or you try to make yourself sound like you're a terrific person, but I know better. And so gathering information doesn't generate understanding. It gives them power over you. It's kind of sad to think that somebody would think that way, isn't it? Or how about a third ugly truth? And that is, you're not the only person that the narcissist is going to treat with manipulation. Over time, whether it's somebody inside your family or somebody that you wind up dating or living with or being married to or somebody that you work with, you may be thinking, why are you treating me this way? Why are you handling things in such a rotten way towards me? Now, you may in fact see them treating other people in a much more friendly or accommodating way, but make no mistake, you're not the only person that's ever been on the receiving end of narcissistic condemnation or invalidation. They may be a little bit more selective based on how vulnerable they think you might be, but the narcissist isn't just singling you out, and you have to keep that in mind. You're not that unique, I hate to tell you, because that's just what they do. They invalidate. And so rather than thinking, what's so bad about me that they would do this, it's not about you. It's about their character, and it's about how they engage with people. That's an ugly truth, but it's a truth that you need to learn to accommodate. How about a fourth ugly truth? And that is, sometimes narcissists may seem to be remorseful if something goes wrong, or if they've made a miscalculation, and they can say something like, "I'm sorry." But as time goes on, they're going to regret that. And so over time, typically, they're going to come up with an alternate explanation, and suddenly they're not nearly as vulnerable, or they're not nearly as wrong or inappropriate as they might otherwise have led you to think that they feel. And so any kind of remorse that they may have can only be temporary. And so it's nice to think, well, this person has a conscience after all. Keeping in mind that one of the defining features of narcissism is the need to stay superior. And so if they let you see too many mistakes or blunders, then it's like, oh no, then you're going to think that I'm equal, or I'm just a regular person, and I'm not, because they have this attitude of entitlement. And so they start going into some revisionist history. Well, that's not really what I meant, or now that I look back on it, I think that there were some other things involved, and it usually involves you doing all sorts of things wrong. So you have to be careful about being pulled in by temporary feelings or sentiments of remorse. Or a fifth ugly truth about a narcissist, and that is they tend to keep a lot of secrets. Now, they may be secretive about money. They may be secretive about where they are, or what their history is, or what their priorities might be. They want to project a certain image because image is very important to them, but it doesn't necessarily line up with facts. I mean, there are times when a narcissist may drive a Porsche, or they may, just be around all these wonderful gatherings, and makes it seem like, wow, you're really important, when in fact they're just barely getting by, or they know people, but not nearly as well as you might think, or they tell you that they're with someone and they weren't, they were doing something else. And so there's that manipulative and exploitive way they craft an image, but it doesn't necessarily match up with reality. And many times you find that out the deeper you go into it, and it becomes very disillusioning. The person you think you know isn't that person necessarily at all. Or how about this one? Narcissists genuinely do not understand how they come across. There may be times, particularly as you know that person pretty well, when you think, you're really kind of haughty, or you really seem to have an inappropriateness, and you step on other people's feelings, and you don't seem to care. And so if you were to try to point those things out, they'll just look at you and say, that's not true, or that's not what happens at all. And when they say that, they're not necessarily doing a PR job. They honestly believe it. They tend to operate with a real low level of self-awareness. And so as you try to speak awareness into them, you're going to find that your way of looking at things doesn't necessarily match pitch with how they see things. Or how about a seventh ugly truth about people in the narcissistic direction? And that is, they tend to live with lots of double standards. They may say they want you to be a certain way, but they don't put those same standards on themselves. For example, they may say, you need to be real wise in the use of your money, and you need to be real careful, when over here they're just being wasteful as all get out. Or they may say something like, you criticize way too much, and you need to pull back on that, when in fact over here they can criticize left and right. Well, that's different because they have a good reason to do so, because it's me speaking. Or it may be that they yell at people, and they say, no, you can't yell at folks, when in fact they do. So often they have this double standard. Of course, if you try to call them out, At first, they may not even acknowledge the truth of it, but if they do, they have a good explanation. Well, I'm unique and I'm different, and so the rules that do apply to you, they don't always apply to me, but I don't even know if you'll get that far with them. Or how about this one? Another ugly truth, this would be number 8, is narcissists are not terribly interested in problem solving. If there's a strain between the two of you, then instead of saying, why don't we put our thoughts out there, mine and yours, and let's see if we can find a good middle ground, instead, they're interested in finding advantages. If there's a problem here, then that means you've been put into a vulnerable position, and they're going to try to somehow or another make themselves better than you, and so they're going to pick at whatever difficulty is there. So a difference between the two of you is automatically interpreted as, you're defective, let's find out what that's all about. A ninth ugly truth about them is, when a narcissist is acting condescending, they're actually compensating for their own feelings of inadequacy. And many times you might be able to see it. When they are haughty, or when they're negative, or talking down to you, they may actually just kind of be revealing kind of a shallow way of thinking. But if you try to point that out, it's like, no. I know what I'm talking about. Narcissists are hurt. They're damaged down at the core, and part of the reason they come on in such an overpowering way is they're afraid of saying, I'm human, or I struggle, or there's something about me that, sometimes just keeps going off base. I don't know what to do with it. They have a hard time saying that, and as you expect them to be more real and open, they can't do that. And then how about a 10th ugly truth about the person with the narcissism? And that is, when a narcissist gets pulled into arguing with you, it actually creates a surge of power and self-importance with them, and they actually kind of like it. And they'll say they hate it, but they actually like it because, keeping in mind, they like to be in that superior position. Now, these are 10 ugly truths that I'm mentioning to you, and I suspect that you can relate to, if not all of them, most of them, if it's a person that's pretty far down on that narcissism spectrum. Now, let's keep in mind, it's hard for you to imagine that anybody would think and act in ways that keep these kind of truths propped up. The narcissist is a damaged individual. And that being the case, the more you engage with them, hoping to take them to that mythical place where there's openness and honesty and accountability with one another, you're going to be sorely disappointed. So as you engage with these individuals, then you're going to need to do so with an understanding that they don't think the same as you, and you can't really require them to think the same as you. I know some people say, well, just get rid of them all, get away from them altogether. And sometimes maybe you do need to separate yourself as much as possible. But in the event that you have ongoing interactions with them, make sure that you match your expectations with what the truth, even if it's ugly, with what the truth is in front of you. Now, I hope that you find these videos to be helpful for you and instructive. I enjoy doing them, and I hope that you would hit that subscribe button that's right underneath this. I also have some links to some books and some online instructions and video workshops, things like that. And so I'm pleased to know that you're a part of our Surviving Narcissism Network, and I will see you next time.